Welcome to another exciting episode of Carving the Divine TV. My name is Yujiro Seki. I'm a director, writer, and the producer of the documentary Carving the Divine. Carving the Divine is about the Buddhist sculptors of Japan, and I'm ready to present it for the first time in the world. But before I do so, I thought it would be a great idea to discuss a basic concept of Buddhism and the history of Buddhism, so that when you guys finally watch my documentary, you guys can watch it at the maximum value. Well, today we're going to be talking about something very interesting. Everybody's curious about, but nobody is courageous enough to talk about this subject. So we want to talk about the religious multiplicity. What that's supposed to mean? And we would like to ask this question: can you be Christian and Buddhist at the same time? Or how can we be a Christian and a Buddhist at the same time? So yes, I invited expert to our show. I would love to introduce to you Dr. Duane Bidwell. Welcome to our show.
Thank you so much for the invitation.
Wonderful, wonderful. Yes, you are very famous in your community, but just in case, for the people who don't know anything about you, please introduce yourself.
Aha. So I am a Presbyterian Christian pastor and a practitioner of Theravada Buddhism, and I teach practical theology, spiritual care, and counseling at Claremont School of Theology at Willamette University, which is a Christian, ecumenical, and interreligious school to train religious leaders and others who are working in human service areas to address the pain, suffering, and joy of human beings in the world.
Very interesting. But as we think, Christianity and Buddhism, they are apple and orange. So how did you end up being two things instead of one thing?
Well, for me personally, it had to do with training in Buddhism with my Buddhist teacher, who is a Vietnamese Theravada monk, and particularly in the practice of vipassana meditation, insight meditation, which is parallel in some ways to contemplative prayer in the Christian tradition. But I, as a child, grew up in the Presbyterian Church and eventually found my way back there through the practice of social service. I was directing an interreligious agency, providing care for people with HIV and AIDS, and I began to experience Christianity in different ways than I had growing up. And that led me to study both traditions and to see that both of them fed my spiritual life in different ways, and that in fact they could come together in really meaningful and generative and life-giving ways in my own practice and in the work I do with people as a counselor and spiritual director, therapist.
Very interesting. So yes, I would love to tell you my personal story now.
Okay.
Yes, not long time ago, or maybe long time ago, I was exchange student, and I came from Japan. And, I wanted to study English in the United States. So, yes, and I was very scared, of course. I had no idea what's going to happen. And I heard that a lot of people from different cultures, I don't know if I could get along with everybody and all this. So I bought a book, going to the United States, studying United States. And yeah, so I thought this book will give me some wisdom that I don't know. So yes, but in this book, in one section, it says, in the United States, you have to believe in something. I was like, what that's supposed to mean? So in the United States, you have to be Christian, you have to be Muslim, you have to be Jewish or Buddhism, whatever it is, you have to be affiliated with something. So if you are not affiliated with anything, if you don't believe in anything, or if you believe in multiple things, there is something wrong with you. You know, I had no idea what that meant.
Right.
So with that being said, so is there something wrong in the United States to believe in multiple things or don't believe in anything? What is the concept of a religious multiplicity?
Aha, that's many questions at once. So first, I would say the idea that you have to belong to a particular religion, like you become a member and you attend a particular style of worship, is very Western European. That religion is something you choose and that's something you do with other people. Whereas in other parts of the world, spirituality and religion aren't necessarily something that you belong to, right? It's just what you grow up in with your family and your culture, and it's something you do as a way of practice rather than saying, I belong to X. Instead, you might have multiple influences. So Shinto, Buddhism, Taoism, Confucianism, all mixed together in some ways. In the United States, Christianity has been dominant for so long that it kind of sets the table for talking about religion and interreligious interaction. So we talk about those things in the terms and norms of US Christianity, where you join a church and you agree to practice in this particular way. But not everyone is that way. So religious multiplicity for me is the experience of someone being formed by more than one religious tradition at the same time. So it might be someone who has chosen to practice both Islam and Judaism, or Hinduism and Christianity, because they find that those spiritual streams flow together in their life in helpful ways. But for other people, it might be something they inherit from their family or their culture. So if your mother is Jewish and your father is Hindu, how do you choose which religion? Or do you grow up with both, informing your life and shaping your experience? And then still other people experience the divine, the holy, as calling them to multiple religious paths. They find that certain forms of practice from Sufi Islam are helpful to them, or are a way of expressing their relationship to the divine, but they also worship in a Christian church and like to receive baptism or communion or participate in worship every week. So multiplicity, in the way I'm speaking about it, is a person who becomes the site of multiple traditions shaping who they are, shaping the way they experience the holy, experiencing the way they experience other people, and the religious practices that shape their spiritual life. I don't know if that makes sense. Does that make sense to you?
Absolutely, absolutely. But you know, I think some people might argue that that's you betraying Jesus Christ or Allah or Yahweh, or you know, whatever that you know core belief that they have. Uh, they say you can do that. How do you say
Yes.
to those people?
Yes. Well, it is in some ways an artifact of the Western study of religion to think that traditions are pure, that they have firm boundaries, and if you are Christian, there is nothing about you that is Muslim, or if you're a Muslim, that's nothing like being a Hindu. But what we know from the history of religions is that religions influence each other in various ways. They overlap. For instance, Muslims bow in prayer, right? They do this when they're praying to Allah, but they got that practice from Christians. And Christians got that practice from Jews. And Jews stopped doing it because Christians took it on. And Christians stopped bowing in the West, and not so much in the Eastern Church, but in the West, because it became associated with Islam. So the practices mutually influence each other. Religions are like organic flows of water. that water multiple places. So there are forms of religion that are more rigid and well-defined that would say you cannot be both Christian and Buddhist. But there are other forms that recognize the mutual influence and the way the traditions are in some ways alike and in some ways different. There's a real push in the United States and Western Europe to try to make religions make sense logically, so that someone would say, well, if doctrine of Christianity conflicts with the doctrine of Buddhism, then you have to give one of those up. But a lot of religiously multiple people say, I can live with the tension. It doesn't have to make logical sense, that it's about my connections to communities and texts and practices. And even if they contradict each other, I find ways to make them work together in my life. And there's a lot that religions share in terms of contemplative practice, in terms of ethics, in terms of the way that we should treat other human beings and the earth, that overlap in significant ways. Mm-hmm. So I would say that in the United States, the idea of religious multiplicity has been pushed under the surface, right? So that religiously multiple people are almost invisible because they aren't acknowledged in research, they aren't a part of the public discourse. And so part of my work as scholar is to help bring religiously multiple people into the public consciousness so that they can claim who they are and begin to normalize this experience that in the United States, many immigrants bring with them. African Christians, for example, are also often influenced by traditional African religions. Asian Christians are also often influenced by Taoism or Buddhism. They might go to the Buddhist temple for certain purposes and the church, Christian church, for others. So helping to bring that visibility in the broader culture is important to me.
Wonderful, wonderful. Very, very impressive. So now I think I would like to ask you your personal question. So you talk about this a little bit in the beginning, but what is your affiliation with Buddhism? And why did you choose Theravada? I know you met your master, but there are many types of Buddhism, and Theravada is one of the strict forms of Buddhism. So yes, please tell us.
So you're asking how I came to Buddhism and why I chose Theravada?
Yes.
As a child, I was raised as a Christian. My parents were Christian, but we didn't often attend church. So we were Christian in name, but not necessarily in practice. And I always felt drawn to meditation and contemplative practice. And in the town where I grew up, there were a number of people who were interested in Zen Buddhism and Buddhist meditation. So that had a little bit of influence on me. And when I went to college, I was required to take a course in religion. So I decided to take a course on Buddhism because I was already interested in its history and its doctrine and its practices. And that led me to make a trip to Thailand with a friend in the United States who is a Buddhist monk. He is a Thai man who had come to the United States to be a religious leader for refugees from Laos. And I went to Thailand with him and lived at the temple with him and began to practice in that setting and see Theravada Buddhism in situ, right? Where it was a natural, expected part of daily life and not something exotic or new. And I really came to respect the lay practitioners that I met and the monastics that I met, both monks and nuns. And when I came back to the United States, I began to look for a teacher. And I found a Vietnamese monk who had originally been a Mahayana monk in central Vietnam, but had changed traditions to become a Theravada monk. And I like the way that he brings both of those traditions together. So the choice of Theravada for me had more to do with the people I met in my life and the form of practice that seemed useful to me. Vipassana meditation is a somewhat structured approach to Buddhist meditation with definite levels or steps to follow to wake up. And I very much appreciate that meditation tradition, and I appreciate the texts that Theravada Buddhism gives privilege to, especially the Dhammapada and some of the early sutras. I would say that although I have taken vows as a lay Theravada Buddhist and I identify as a practitioner of Vipassana meditation, that I am also influenced by other Buddhist traditions, particularly Mahayana in the Zen tradition, both Japanese and Chinese, and a little bit by the Tibetan tradition. But my home is in Theravada Buddhism. So I might visit those other schools, but Theravada is my primary place of Buddhist practice.
Wonderful, wonderful. So now, why did you come back to Christianity?
I came back to Christianity in large part because my experience was that that is what God was asking of me. That Jesus is a very important person for me. I say Jesus is my savior and the Buddha is my teacher. And that Buddhist practice helps me be a better Christian, to live a more moral or virtuous life, to develop the sort of concentration and wisdom that helps me enact my Christian virtues, Christian commitments in the world. And I came back to Christianity in part because I saw Christianity doing so much good in the world for social justice and for helping people. And Buddhism has a reputation for being more focused on wisdom than love, and more focused on achieving enlightenment than serving others. I don't think that's entirely true, but Christianity has a reputation for being more focused on love than wisdom, and being more focused on helping others than in cultivating individual enlightenment, right? So those things came together, and I was working in social service and mental health services, and Christianity seemed to pull me in those directions. It's mysterious to talk about in some ways because I experience it as this internal call or luring of me back to Christianity. And for a while I struggled with whether I needed to give up the Buddhist parts of my life in order to be Christian. But over time, I found that they began to dance together and to make me more fully human than I could be with one or the other.
Wonderful, wonderful, beautifully said. So yes, now I want to hear your story of these traditions in action. So what are some of the examples of these traditions working together in your daily life, or maybe it's for the big picture? So whatever you would like to tell us, please tell us.
Well, maybe I could start by telling you about my daily practice that would illustrate how they come together, in that I start most days by participating in morning prayer. But my morning prayer, although it is shaped by Christian traditions, also includes a little bit of chanting of Buddhist text and Vipassana meditation, so that I bring that together in my daily devotional life. I may begin with Christian prayer, and then I could shift into Buddhist practice, and then come back to Christian text, and finish with the Lord's Prayer, which is a central prayer in Christianity. I also there are a number of commentaries, Christian commentaries on Buddhist texts and Buddhist commentaries on Christian texts that I use to study and to reflect on what sacred text says to me. I could read you a sort of longish section, several pages from my book that talks about how spontaneously my practice shifted from Christian to Buddhist and back to Christian again during a hike in the mountains. But I don't know if we have time for that.
Please go ahead.
Yes? Okay. So let me find it here. So this is from a section of the book called Touching Ground in Evi Canyon. And it has to do with my experience hiking when I was very frustrated, and the ways that those spiritual streams came together in that moment. But oh, here it is. Okay. So nothing convinces me of the truth of Buddhism's first noble truth, dukkha, suffering, the impossibility of satisfaction, like the act of writing. Once at a coffee shop, I rewrote a single sentence for an hour or more. The argument refused to advance. Words bounced against my skull. I just knew my efforts dishonored the material. Nothing worked. And then the mountain spoke, calling me from the north, and I left the cafe. 10 minutes later, I was hiking up Evi Canyon in the foothills of Mount Baldy in Southern California. As I walked among the old growth oaks beside a spring-fed stream, the noisy concepts in my head dropped away, and I returned to my body. Footsteps, breath, sunlight on skin, vivid blue sky, scent of sage, croaking of ravens. Anxiety evaporated. I became present to the world. I didn't pray or engage in Buddhist practice. I simply walked until I felt grounded, present to, and engaged by the world in a way I had not been all morning. Then I sat beside the trail above the stream and folded my legs into the half lotus position. I did not decide at a conscious level to meditate. Sometimes vipassana, insight meditation, just happens. I sat mindfully in the forest, aware of my breathing, and noticed what was going on. That's all. As the slogan says, Buddhist meditation is not what you think. My awareness flickered between an immediate non-dualism, in which there was no separation between me and the canyon, and heart knowledge, a sense that something other than myself was the source of my experience and was, at the same time, knowing the experience with and through me. In time, gratitude appeared. Typically, a vipassana practitioner observes a mental event like gratitude, noticing the way it comes and goes. But instead of observing gratitude that morning, I engaged it as an appropriate response to the liberation I experienced. Thus, gratitude served as an invitation, a gateway or hyperlink to a different spiritual practice. I moved into discursive meditation on creation, a Christian reflection on the Buddhist doctrine of interbeing. I acknowledged how the mountain, stream, trees, and sky gave rise to and sustained my own being. The experience was like living a wordless psalm or canticle, a rich appreciation of the dance of creation, the mutual indwelling, interpenetration, or abiding of all things. But sounds from up the canyon interrupted me. Two hikers came down the trail from Potato Mountain, and the moment I heard them, I anticipated feeling angry about the intrusion. But instead of anger, I felt anticipation. I turned my head to greet them, but they were so engrossed in conversation, they didn't notice me sitting beside the trail. When I realized they hadn't seen me, I expected to feel smug superiority. Unlike me, they were in the wilderness, but not present to it. But rather than judgment, I felt compassion bubble up. I noted it and returned to mindful sitting, I couldn't have described the shift so neatly then, but in retrospect, it seems as if Christian identity faded into the background as Buddhist identity returned to the fore. So that's a taste of how the traditions come and go, ebb and flow in my own practice and daily life.
Very impressive. I'm speechless.
You are kind to say that. I don't know if it's impressive, but that's the way it works.
No, it's great. Beautifully said. So that's the kind of show that I wanted to have. So I think I will have a final question for you. I don't know if you could answer this question. This is so difficult. So, but can we be Christian and Buddhist at the same time?
Absolutely.
Wonderful. We learned a lot today. Yes, I would love to ask you what's going on in your world right now. And if you have some information about social media, a website, and profile hopes, you can tell us more about the book that you mentioned.
Sure. So I don't have my own website. I have a profile on the Claremont School of Theology website, but I do have a professional Facebook page, Duane R. Bidwell, where I post updates and speaking engagements and videos and that kind of thing. The book I was reading from is this book, When One Religion Isn't Enough, The Lives of Spiritually Fluid People, which was published by Beacon Press. It is a study of people who are religiously multiple, and it treats their experience as an authority on what it means to live with more than one tradition, and puts their experience into conversation with the formal doctrines and texts of various world traditions. But it tries to say, before we can judge religious multiplicity, we have to understand it as it's lived by people who claim more than one tradition. If we try to assess it before we understand it, we do a disservice to the human lived experience. So it is an attempt to give voice to people who live with multiplicity in various ways, and then to say, what can we learn from these people that could benefit all of us in various religious traditions?
Wonderful, wonderful. Yeah, the people who are interested, I bet everybody is interested. So we gotta get the book and we gotta read it. So wonderful. So yes, if you think this information is useful, make sure to subscribe my YouTube channel, follow me on Twitter and Instagram, and like me on my Facebook, because that's how we do it in the 21st century. So thank you so much, Dr. Bidwell, for coming here and to talk to us about the religious multiplicity. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It was wonderful to be with you.